They said Ethan Whitmore had it all. An opulent estate in the Hamptons, a billion-dollar real estate empire, and a reputation polished to perfection. To the world, he was the picture of success. A man who had built himself from the ground up and secured his place among New York's elite. By his side was his pregnant wife, Olivia Whitmore, a woman admired for her grace, intelligence, and quiet strength. High society adored her, praising the effortless way she carried herself at galas, fundraisers, and magazine spreads. She was the perfect counterpart to Ethan's ambition, the stabilizing force behind his empire. Yet beneath the glamour, a secret brewed, one that threatened to unravel everything. Ethan had been careful, or so he thought. But when the invitation for his Harvard reunion arrived, he made a reckless decision. Instead of attending with Olivia, he would bring Vanessa Sinclair, the woman he had been seeing in the shadows. Maybe it was ego, maybe it was thrill-seeking, but Ethan was convinced he could control the situation. He had no idea that Olivia had a move of her own, one that would shake him to his core. Ethan Whitmore was a self-made man, a visionary who turned struggling properties into luxury landmarks. At 38, his towering frame, sharp blue eyes, and commanding presence exuded power. He had built Whitmore Enterprises from nothing, earning the loyalty of hedge fund managers, CEOs, and even Hollywood investors. His wealth afforded him a sprawling, oceanfront estate where Olivia had spent the last few months focusing on their growing family. She was everything Ethan wasn't, calm, steady, and unshaken by the chaos of their fast-paced world. Coming from a lineage of old money, she had given his rise credibility, adding an air of sophistication to his empire. Olivia's pregnancy only heightened their media presence, their marriage appearing stronger than ever. Yet, behind Ethan's charming smile, cracks were forming. Olivia sensed the shift, the late nights, the unexplained trips, the way his touch had lost warmth. She had been raised by a father who built legal empires, and she knew one truth: when a man starts hiding things, the foundation beneath him is already crumbling. The distance between Ethan and Olivia had been growing for months, but now the silence between them felt heavier than ever. She had always understood his demanding career, the late-night meetings, and the last-minute business trips, but lately his absence had begun to feel deliberate. The man who once made her feel like the center of his world now seemed distracted, detached. At first, she brushed it off, convincing herself it was the weight of impending fatherhood. Maybe he's overwhelmed, she reasoned. But small details nagged at her. The way he barely met her gaze, the tension in his shoulders when she asked about his schedule. Then came the credit card charges. Expensive dinners at restaurants she'd never been to, hotel stays in cities he claimed to have no business in. Olivia was no stranger to the power of appearances. She had grown up in a family where image was everything, where wealth wasn't just about money, but about legacy. And Ethan's success had been built on that same foundation, one of influence, control, and meticulous reputation management. If their carefully crafted public image wavered, the empire they had built together could crumble. What Olivia didn't know was that the cracks had already begun to spread. Months before the college reunion invitation arrived, Ethan had met Vanessa Sinclair at an exclusive rooftop event in Manhattan. Introduced by Victoria Monroe, a socialite known for stirring up drama, Vanessa carried herself with the confidence of a woman who knew exactly how much power she held. With piercing green eyes and waves of dark hair cascading over her shoulders, she was impossible to ignore. Ethan noticed her immediately. She wasn't like the women who constantly sought his attention, hoping for a taste of his wealth and status. Vanessa exuded something different: control, intrigue, danger. Dressed in a deep emerald silk gown that clung to her every curve, she was a walking temptation. Their first conversation was casual, nothing more than a polite exchange about the city's skyline and the brand of champagne in his hand. But in the way she held his gaze, the way her lips curved ever so slightly when he spoke, Ethan felt something stir inside him, a thrill he hadn't felt in years. At first, it was just a game, harmless flirtation, a distraction from the expectations weighing on him. But Vanessa wasn't content to remain in the background, and Ethan, despite everything he had to lose, found himself unable to resist. His pregnant wife waited at home, trusting him. And yet, he was already stepping toward a decision that would change everything. Ethan Whitmore's phone buzzed with an unknown Manhattan number. Normally, he wouldn't answer unsolicited calls, but something made him pick up. "Ethan Whitmore," he said, keeping his tone neutral. A smooth, confident voice responded. "Mr. Whitmore, this is Vanessa Sinclair. We met briefly at Victoria Monroe's event. I was hoping we could discuss a potential PR collaboration for Whitmore Enterprises." He hesitated. Olivia usually handled their philanthropic partnerships, and his company had an entire in-house PR team. But the memory of Vanessa, the way she had looked at him with quiet amusement, as if she knew something he didn't, lingered in his mind. "Certainly," he replied, feigning indifference. "Let's set up a meeting." That lunch at the Redwood Club in Midtown was supposed to be just business, but it turned into something else entirely. Vanessa had a way of making him feel invincible, feeding his ego with compliments on his bold real estate developments and strategic investments. She leaned in when she spoke, her fingers brushing against his forearm as she laughed at his stories. Olivia had always been supportive, steady in a way that anchored him. But Vanessa? She was a storm, unpredictable and exhilarating. Over dessert, a decadent chocolate mousse, she tilted her head slightly, watching him with those piercing green eyes. "You know," she murmured, "you shouldn't have to carry all this alone." Her voice was velvet, each word wrapping around him like a secret. "A man like you deserves a partner who understands his drive, his passion." Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling something dangerous stir inside him. He had everything: a beautiful home, a thriving business, a pregnant wife who adored him. But in that moment, none of it felt like enough. When the bill arrived, Vanessa made a show of reaching for it, but Ethan shook his head. "I don't let a lady pay," he said smoothly. "That lunch should have been the end of it." But it wasn't. Phone calls turned into more meetings turned into late-night drinks, hushed conversations in dimly lit corners, and lingering glances that lasted too long. Then came the night at the Belrose Hotel in Boston. Ethan told himself it was just a fleeting indulgence, a moment of escape. But the moment stretched into something more, something insatiable. Like a fire left unchecked, his affair with Vanessa consumed him. And with every reckless decision, he edged closer to a disaster he couldn't see coming. Ethan thought he had mastered the art of deception. He had managed to keep both worlds separate: his life with Olivia, his devoted and pregnant wife, and the reckless affair that had consumed him. He lied easily, weaving tales of urgent business expansions and last-minute trips, believing his success made him untouchable. But what he failed to realize was that Olivia had started watching. She had learned the art of quiet observation from her father, Henry Calloway, a man who built his reputation dismantling airtight cases with nothing more than fragments of truth. As a child, Olivia would peek into his study, watching him meticulously sift through evidence, unraveling lies one thread at a time. That same instinct for detail was now leading her to the truth about Ethan. At first, she ignored the uneasy feeling that crept in when his business trips grew more frequent, when his excuses became vaguer. She wanted to believe it was just the pressure of work, the impending arrival of their child weighing on him. But the clues kept piling up. It started with an offhand comment from their housekeeper, Maria Lopez. One evening, as Olivia returned from a prenatal yoga session, Maria mentioned finding a pair of sunglasses left on the kitchen counter. "Oh, Mrs. Whitmore, I thought they were yours, but I put them away in the closet just in case." Olivia frowned. She never wore that brand, or that style. Then came the bank statements. Olivia handled most of their household budgeting, so seeing large transactions wasn't unusual. But these, lavish dinners at waterfront restaurants in Newport, luxury spa bookings in Boston, a diamond bracelet from an exclusive jeweler, none of which she had received. Ethan had been in both cities for business, or so he claimed. But why charge such personal expenses to their account? She felt a sharp nausea rise, one that had nothing to do with pregnancy. Still, she kept her composure. She quietly took screenshots of the statements, saved them in a folder only she could access. And then she made a decision. Her father's longtime legal associate, Jacob Lawson, had once told her, when you suspect someone is lying, don't confront them first. Gather everything. Let them think they're in control. So Olivia did just that. She hired a discreet investigator recommended by Jacob, and within days she had undeniable proof, Photos, dates, hotel reservations, even surveillance footage of Ethan with Vanessa Sinclair. Every bouquet of flowers Ethan brought home, every soft apology, every kiss on the forehead felt like an insult. But Olivia didn't lash out. Not yet. Because she knew the perfect moment was coming. And when it did, she would make sure Ethan realized exactly who he had underestimated. Ethan was convinced he had everything under control. Olivia's gentle smiles, her calm demeanor, the way she never questioned his whereabouts, it all reassured him that she suspected nothing. If she did, she certainly wasn't showing it. She played the role of the devoted, pregnant wife flawlessly, accepting his excuses without confrontation. When he brought home spa vouchers as peace offerings or kissed her forehead with forced affection, she simply thanked him. But beneath that composed exterior, Olivia was already several steps ahead. She had no intention of confronting him without leverage. She had seen firsthand how easily Ethan manipulated narratives, how effortlessly he turned obstacles into advantages. He had built an empire on charm and persuasion, convincing investors, board members, and entire city councils to believe in his vision. Olivia knew better than to challenge him without undeniable proof. Instead, she waited, watched, and strategized. Then the invitation arrived. A crisp ivory envelope embossed with the Harvard University insignia. Their 10-year college reunion was just weeks away. Ethan had always spoken of these reunions as pivotal networking events, gatherings where old connections turned into new business opportunities. Naturally, Olivia assumed she would attend. But something was different this time. Ethan hesitated when she mentioned it, brushing off the conversation with vague excuses about work demands. That hesitation made Olivia certain this event was about more than reconnecting with old classmates. Meanwhile, across the city, Vanessa Sinclair sauntered into Ethan's Manhattan office with the confidence of a woman who knew her power. She wore a form-fitting navy dress, her green eyes flashing with intrigue. Ethan had invited her under the guise of discussing a new PR campaign for Whitmore Enterprises, but they both knew the truth. He simply wanted to see her, without the prying eyes of hotel staff or the risk of public encounters. She let her fingers trail over the polished mahogany desk before spotting the invitation sitting among business documents. "So this is why you've been a little distracted this week." She picked up the card, reading the gold-embossed lettering. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "It's a big deal. Some of my first investors came from connections I made at Harvard." Vanessa smirked, setting the card down. "I assume your wife usually attends these things." His jaw tightened. "She does, but this year, I'm not sure I want her there." Her lips curled in amusement. "And why's that?" Ethan hesitated for just a moment before answering. "Our marriage is complicated, especially now with the baby." Vanessa arched a brow. "And what does that mean for us?" Ethan had no answer, not one he was ready to admit. Ethan had never liked feeling cornered. He was a man who controlled conversations, who dictated the terms of every deal. But Vanessa had a way of slipping past his defenses, tilting her head just enough to let him know she saw through the facade. "So," she murmured, tracing her fingers along the edge of his desk, "if your marriage is so distant, why not finalize things? What's stopping you? The backlash or the money?" Ethan exhaled sharply, shifting in his seat. "It's not that simple, Vanessa. Olivia is pregnant with my child. Leaving her outright, right now, would destroy my image, and legally, it would be a nightmare." Her lips curved into a knowing smile. "You're always thinking 5 steps ahead, Ethan. That's why I like you." She picked up the Harvard reunion invitation, letting it dangle between her fingers. "Speaking of strategy, if Olivia won't be attending, maybe I should." Ethan let out a low, nervous chuckle. "And cause a scene? The alumni board would have a heart attack if I showed up with someone who isn't my wife." Vanessa shrugged, feigning innocence. "Who says we have to arrive together? I could simply happen to be there. It's a great place to network, isn't it? You wouldn't want me to miss out on potential clients." He hesitated. There was something thrilling, reckless, about the idea of bringing his mistress into the same space where he had once been celebrated as the golden boy who married the perfect woman. Maybe this was a way to push the boundaries, to see how far he could go before the illusion cracked. They ended their conversation without a firm decision, but an unspoken understanding lingered. Vanessa wasn't content staying in the shadows, and Ethan was on the brink of giving her exactly what she wanted. As the reunion weekend approached, Olivia sensed the shift in her husband. He seemed torn, like a man balancing on the edge of a decision he hadn't yet made. Whenever she casually mentioned the event, he deflected with vague responses. "We'll see," he would say, or, "Let's talk about it later." That was enough confirmation for Olivia. He didn't want her there. She remained outwardly calm, never pressing too hard, never giving him reason to suspect she already knew. Instead, she waited, watching as Ethan unknowingly walked himself straight into the trap she had quietly set in motion. Olivia continued to observe without making a single misstep. She checked Ethan's phone records discreetly, scanning through the call history. The same number appeared repeatedly, Vanessa Sinclair. She recognized it instantly from the investigator's report. Every discovery felt like a fresh betrayal, a deeper crack in the life she had carefully built. But she didn't react. Not yet. She had a plan, and it required patience. That evening, Olivia sat in the library, reclining slightly with her feet propped up on an ottoman, one hand resting on her growing belly. She scrolled through an email from Harvard University's alumni board, confirming their attendance at the upcoming reunion. The schedule was laid out: a cocktail reception on Friday, a campus tour on Saturday morning, followed by a lavish banquet that evening. She wondered if Ethan planned to skip the event entirely, or if he was scheming to attend alone. Just then, he walked in, loosening his tie, hesitating near the doorway as if debating whether to step further inside. "Long day," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "Thinking about heading to bed." Olivia glanced up from her laptop. "You haven't eaten," she said gently. "I can have Maria prepare something." He shook his head quickly. "Not hungry." She closed her laptop slowly, watching him. "Ethan, about the reunion. Are we going or not? The board is expecting us both." His posture stiffened. He avoided her gaze, shrugging as though the question barely registered. "I don't know. Things at Whitmore Enterprises are insane right now. Not sure it's the best time for me to take off and socialize." Olivia smiled, a patient, knowing smile. "It's just a weekend. You always say how important these reunions are for networking." She let a pause stretch between them, then added lightly, "If you don't want me to come, that's fine. I don't want to be a burden, especially in my condition." She placed a protective hand over her belly, watching him carefully. Ethan's gaze flickered toward her stomach, then back to the floor. "It's not that," he said quickly. "I just think maybe you should stay home and rest. The doctor said unnecessary travel isn't ideal in your third trimester." His concern sounded rehearsed. Olivia had traveled across Europe just a few months ago without issue, and he hadn't objected then. She nodded, her voice soft. "If that's how you feel, I understand." A long silence stretched between them. Then Ethan nodded curtly. "Yeah, let's do that." Without another word, he turned and walked out, shutting the door behind him. Olivia exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening around the edge of her laptop. She had all the confirmation she needed. Olivia leaned back in her chair, her fingers resting gently on her belly. The sting of rejection lingered, but beneath the ache, there was something else: satisfaction. Ethan didn't want her at the reunion. That alone told her everything she needed to know. He was hiding something. Or someone. She exhaled slowly, whispering, "It's going to be okay. I promise." Across the state, Harvard University's iconic archway stood tall as alumni arrived in waves. The manicured lawns, towering buildings, and historic clock tower set the stage for a weekend of nostalgia and networking. Tech moguls, Wall Street executives, and political up-and-comers had flown in, eager to flaunt their success. Ethan Whitmore made sure his arrival was just as grand. His private helicopter touched down on the outskirts of the city, a calculated display of status. Everything about him, his crisp designer suit, his effortless charm, was curated for maximum effect. He had spent years mastering the art of perception. Vanessa Sinclair was part of that illusion. The two had planned a careful ruse. Officially, Vanessa was in Boston for business, meeting with potential PR clients. Coincidentally, she would be stopping by the reunion. To Ethan, it was thrilling, dangerous, a test of just how much he could get away with. Yet, as he neared the campus, a strange unease settled over him. Olivia's calm acceptance of his last-minute decision gnawed at him. She hadn't questioned him. She hadn't argued. In fact, she had even encouraged him to go. Was she truly that trusting? Or had she figured him out? He arrived at the cocktail reception alone, stepping into the grand hall where champagne glasses clinked beneath crystal chandeliers. Conversations hummed around him, filled with tales of career victories and luxury vacations. Ethan moved through the crowd effortlessly, shaking hands, accepting congratulations on his upcoming fatherhood, playing his role to perfection. Then, Vanessa entered. She wore a sleek black cocktail dress, every detail designed to draw attention. Heads turned as she strode into the room, her green eyes scanning for him with an air of practiced confidence. Ethan's pulse quickened. They had agreed to keep their interactions subtle. Stolen glances, polite exchanges, but the electric pull between them was undeniable. An older professor, Dr. Richard Callahan, waved him over to a group of esteemed alumni. Before Ethan could react, Vanessa had already slipped into the conversation, introduced as an innovative PR consultant. Ethan shook her hand, keeping his expression neutral. But as he met her amused gaze, he knew this was a game he was dangerously close to losing. Ethan barely had a moment to breathe before he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Where's Olivia? I was looking forward to seeing her. I heard she's expecting." He turned to find Ryan Carter, his old college roommate, watching him closely. Ethan forced a casual smile. "She's doing well. Just couldn't travel. Doctor's orders." Ryan nodded, but his expression didn't quite soften. "Makes sense, I suppose. Though I thought I saw pictures of you two traveling together recently. Guess her condition changed." The unspoken suspicion in his tone made Ethan's shoulders tense. Before he could formulate a response, Vanessa smoothly stepped in, handing him a fresh glass of champagne. "Ethan, darling," she purred, looping her arm through his. "You promised to show me those new campus renovations. Care to lead the way?" Grateful for the escape, Ethan quickly guided her away, leaving Ryan standing with a raised eyebrow. Once they were alone in the corridor, Ethan turned to Vanessa, his voice low. "We should be careful. My old friends are asking questions." Vanessa smirked, tightening her grip around his arm. "Relax. The more we act like there's nothing to hide, the less people will suspect." Her confidence was unwavering, but Ethan wasn't convinced. As the night wore on, he caught himself glancing at his phone, half expecting a message from Olivia. But none came, and that unsettled him more than anything. Back at their Hamptons estate, Olivia stood in the quiet stillness of their bedroom. The ocean breeze drifted in through the open balcony doors, but it did little to calm the storm inside her. Ethan's absence, combined with the staff's practice distance, left her too much time to think. She paced the room, one hand resting protectively over her belly, the other gripping her phone. Earlier that evening, her father, Henry Calloway, had called to check in. A retired attorney with a lifetime of experience in unraveling deception, his voice had been steady yet firm. "You've made your decision, Olivia," he had said. "Now follow through, and if you need me, I'm just a call away." She had assured him she was fine, but now, scrolling through social media, she felt her pulse quicken. The Harvard alumni page was already filling with photos. Smiling graduates, clinking glasses, a lavish banquet under golden chandeliers. And then she saw him. Ethan, standing in the background of a group photo. Beside him, unmistakable even with her head slightly turned, was Vanessa Sinclair. A sharp wave of betrayal hit her, but she exhaled slowly, steadying herself. She had expected this, and she was ready. Olivia's fingers trembled as she zoomed in on the photo. The woman standing beside Ethan, her head turned slightly, was unmistakable. That posture, that long, dark hair. Vanessa Sinclair. A wave of nausea rolled through her, sharp and overwhelming. She clenched the phone, her breath catching in her throat. It wasn't as if she hadn't suspected it. She had seen the signs, gathered the proof. But seeing them together, publicly, sent a fresh ache through her chest. She closed her eyes and exhaled slowly, recalling the breathing techniques from her prenatal yoga classes. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. She had made a decision 2 nights before Ethan left for the reunion. Sitting across from her father's legal associate, Jacob Lawson, she had gone over the details of their prenuptial agreement, a document she had once signed with blind faith in her husband. Back then, she had believed in their love, but her father had been more cautious, insisting on provisions to protect her family's assets. If Ethan engaged in gross misconduct, specifically adultery, control over large portions of Whitmore Enterprises could shift under Olivia's name. And now, with her pregnancy, the stakes were even higher. "I never wanted it to come to this," she had whispered to Jacob. "But now, it feels inevitable." Jacob had offered her a steady nod. "You have every right to protect yourself and your child. Once his affair is undeniably proven, we can move forward. The decision is yours." Now, as Ethan basked in the glow of his reunion, flaunting his mistress in the very circles where Olivia had once stood beside him, she felt a mixture of sorrow and resolve. The puzzle pieces were coming together. She had the evidence, photos, credit card transactions, eyewitness accounts. But beyond the legal ramifications, it was the sheer humiliation that burned the most. Ethan wasn't just betraying her, he was doing it publicly. But if he thought she would stay silent, he was mistaken. By midnight, she sat at her writing desk, her movements steady despite the storm brewing inside her. She drafted a letter, scanning it carefully for any sign of emotion. It wasn't a plea, nor was it an argument. It was an ultimatum. If Ethan wanted to parade his mistress at his cherished reunion, Olivia would respond in a way that shook the very foundation of his empire. She folded the letter, sealing it inside an envelope, then placed it neatly inside her desk drawer. Then, with as much calm as she could gather, she turned off the lights and whispered, "It's time." Olivia switched off the bedside lamp, exhaling slowly as she stared at the ceiling. She had done everything she could to prepare. Now, all she could do was wait. Morning arrived, crisp and bright at Harvard University, the campus buzzing with excitement as alumni toured the grounds they once called home. Ethan led Vanessa through the newly renovated Whitmore Hall, named after his grandfather, who had been one of the school's most generous benefactors. He spoke with pride, pointing out the modern additions his company had funded. But with every step, a gnawing guilt took root in his chest. His family name was etched into the very walls of this institution. Yet here he was, parading his mistress while his pregnant wife waited at home. Vanessa, however, seemed completely at ease. She navigated the event with practiced charm, exchanging pleasantries with alumni and accepting compliments on her impeccable sense of style. "Who's your husband?" someone asked, noting the absence of a class ring or name tag. Vanessa flashed a dazzling smile. "Oh, I'm not an alumna, just here meeting potential PR clients. Ethan was kind enough to show me around." Most people accepted this explanation without question. It wasn't uncommon for outside professionals to attend Harvard reunions, hoping to establish business connections. But not everyone was so easily convinced. Ryan Carter, Ethan's old roommate, watched the pair with narrowed eyes. Whispers spread through the crowd. "Who is this woman with Ethan Whitmore? And where is Olivia?" By lunchtime, a casual barbecue reception had been set up near the campus lake. Alumni gathering around picnic tables, reminiscing and snapping photos for social media. Ethan mingled effortlessly, slipping into conversation with former classmates and business associates. Vanessa remained nearby, but gave him space. After all, appearances needed to be maintained. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Olivia. A sudden rush of anxiety gripped him. He stepped away from the crowd before answering, forcing a steady tone. "Olivia, how are you feeling?" Her voice was calm, emotionless. "I'm fine, thank you. I just wanted to let you know some documents arrived this morning. They require your signature." Ethan frowned. "Documents? From who?" "Jacob Lawson's office," Olivia replied smoothly, referring to the law firm that handled Whitmore Enterprises' legal matters. "He said it's urgent. Something about ensuring everything is in proper order regarding our child's future." A cold chill ran down Ethan's spine. For the first time that weekend, he felt truly afraid. A sharp jolt of anxiety shot through Ethan as Olivia's words sank in. "Why didn't you mention this before?" he asked, gripping his phone tighter. "I only received them today," Olivia replied, her voice calm, too calm. "It's nothing urgent, I'm sure, but Jacob insisted you sign them. Perhaps you could come home tonight, or first thing tomorrow at the latest." Ethan swallowed hard. Okay, I'll see what I can do." The call ended. He glanced back at Vanessa, who was laughing effortlessly with a group of alumni near the lake, entirely unaware of the cold dread creeping through his veins. Documents. Urgent. His child's future. Henry Calloway's influence loomed over him like a shadow. Olivia's father had always been protective, especially regarding legal and financial matters. For a moment, Ethan considered leaving immediately, catching a red-eye back to the Hamptons before things spiraled further. But the Saturday night banquet was still ahead, the crown jewel of the reunion. It was a stage where he could solidify new business connections, maintain his status among industry elites. He had worked too hard for his success. The documents could wait. Olivia could wait. Couldn't she? Still, a whisper of unease clung to him, a lingering sense that his wife, pregnant calm, was more dangerous than he had ever realized. By evening, the grand ballroom at Harvard University gleamed under the soft glow of a massive crystal chandelier. The banquet tables were draped in deep burgundy linens embroidered with the school's crest. The elite of Harvard's alumni poured in, dressed in their finest, eager to dine, dance, and expand their networks. Ethan entered with Vanessa on his arm, a bold move that sent ripples through the room. Conversations hushed for a brief moment before quiet murmurs and exchanged glances resumed. He forced a confident smile, nodding at those who greeted him. Vanessa, radiant in a sleeveless silver gown, wasted no time charming the right people: trustees, donors, influential alumni. She was magnetic, her quick wit drawing people in, her poise flawless. But not everyone was charmed. From a table near the stage, Ryan Carter watched with narrowed eyes. Beside him, Dr. Regina Porter, a respected professor, exchanged a knowing glance. Ethan could feel their scrutiny like a weight on his shoulders. Still, he kept his expression smooth, pretending not to notice. But as he moved through the room, a gnawing thought clung to him. What if Olivia wasn't waiting at home at all? What if she was already making her next move? Ethan could feel the weight of the glances being cast his way. Ryan Carter and Dr. Regina Porter spoke in hushed tones, nodding in his direction as if piecing something together. He ignored them, forcing his attention back to Vanessa, who dominated the conversation at their table with effortless charm. As dinner was served, perfectly seared salmon, roasted vegetables, and a carefully selected bottle of wine, Vanessa steered the discussion toward Harvard's future. She asked about expansion projects, endowments, and upcoming philanthropic initiatives. Ethan interjected now and then, boasting about his business ventures, but his mind was elsewhere. No matter how hard he tried to push it away, Olivia's voice lingered in his mind. Documents. Jacob Lawson. Urgent. The child's future. Was tonight the night his carefully curated life would come crashing down? A sharp tap on the microphone pulled him from his thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Harvard's 10th year reunion banquet, the MC announced. Tonight, we celebrate the legacy of our distinguished alumni, whose contributions continue to shape the future of our institution. Applause rippled through the room as Ethan straightened in his seat. He knew his moment was coming. He had made a substantial donation earlier in the year to modernize Whitmore Hall, and the administration had promised him public recognition. Sure enough, the MC continued, and now a special thanks to Mr. Ethan Whitmore, class of 2010, for his generous support in transforming our campus. Mr. Whitmore, would you please join us on stage? He rose, buttoning his tuxedo jacket, casting a quick glance at Vanessa, who flashed him an encouraging smile. As he stepped up to the microphone, the familiar surge of pride washed over him. He delivered a polished speech about legacy, education, and investing in future generations. The audience applauded. Cameras flashed. This was his world, a place where he thrived, where admiration and power shielded him from the chaos of reality. As he stepped down from the stage, a fleeting thought crossed his mind. Olivia should have been here, standing beside him, smiling as she always did. But he shoved the thought aside and returned to Vanessa, relishing the envious glances thrown his way. For now, at least, his secret seemed safe. But the night was far from over. Hundreds of miles away, Olivia sat in her softly lit living room, sipping herbal tea, her expression unreadable. The envelope she had prepared lay on the table beside her. The storm she had set in motion was about to make landfall. A gentle ocean breeze drifted through the open French doors of Olivia's bedroom. She sat in a loose, comfortable gown, the fabric draping over her pregnant belly, her posture composed. On the surface, she looked serene. Inside, her heart pounded. Earlier that evening, she had placed a carefully worded call to Harvard's event administration. She didn't reveal her identity, only made a polite request for a handwritten note to be discreetly delivered to Ethan Whitmore during the banquet. The staff, eager to accommodate the spouse of a distinguished donor, agreed without hesitation. At precisely 9 p.m., her phone dinged. Message from courier. Delivery made successfully. Olivia glanced at the clock, picturing the scene unfolding miles away. Ethan, standing tall under the ballroom's glittering chandeliers, basking in admiration. Vanessa at his side, exuding confidence, unaware that the night was about to take a turn. She exhaled slowly, recalling her father's words. One well-timed move can shift the balance of power. Beside her lay an unopened baby blanket, a gift from old family friends. She ran her fingers over the soft fabric, thinking of the future that awaited her child. She was no longer acting on emotion alone. This was about security, about showing Ethan that betrayal had consequences. With steady hands, she typed a brief email to Jacob Lawson, confirming their plan was in motion. Then, she turned to something far more personal, her diary. She wrote without filter. I have loved Ethan from the moment he walked into my life, full of ambition and promise. He is not just the father of my child, but the man I once imagined growing old with. And yet here I am, betrayed, heartbroken, but clear-eyed for the first time. My father always taught me that no one gets to define my worth. Tonight, I am setting boundaries. If Ethan chooses to cross them, then I will know he was never truly mine. She set the pen down, an unexpected wave of both sadness and strength washing over her. Would Ethan ignore the message? Dismiss it? Or would he finally realize she was not some passive bystander in their marriage? Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the courier, this time with a photo attached. Olivia's breath caught as she opened it. There, in the dim glow of the banquet hall, was Ethan, his tuxedo crisp, his posture rigid. In his hands, the note, her note. His face had drained of color. Beside him, Vanessa turned toward him with a questioning glance, oblivious to the fact that everything was about to change. Olivia watched the photo on her phone for a long moment before setting it down beside her cup. A faint pang of heartbreak surfaced, but it wasn't new. It had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. So it's really her, she thought. He's parading her in public. But she had expected nothing less. She took a slow, final sip of her tea, letting the warmth steady her. Then, placing a hand over her belly, she whispered, "It's almost over. Soon, we'll be free." With that, she switched off the living room light and made her way upstairs. Her movements were calm, measured. The storm had already been set in motion. Now, all she had to do was wait. Hundreds of miles away, Ethan Whitmore was deep in conversation with a Harvard board trustee when a server discreetly approached him, a small envelope in hand. "Pardon me, Mr. Whitmore," the server said politely. "A note arrived for you." Ethan hesitated before taking it, curiosity flickering in his eyes. As he stepped aside to open it, Vanessa instinctively drifted closer, watching. Inside was a simple, folded piece of paper, just a few lines. "Ethan, we both know what's happening here. I won't fight in public, but I will protect our child and myself at any cost. Please read the attached letter carefully. Olivia." His breath hitched. Tucked behind the note was an official document, one he immediately recognized. His pulse pounded as he unfolded the page, his eyes scanning the crisp letterhead of Jacob Lawson's law firm. His stomach twisted as the words came into focus. It was the morality clause from their prenuptial agreement. One he had signed years ago, back when he had convinced himself it was just a formality. It outlined, in brutal clarity, that in the event of adultery, especially during Olivia's pregnancy, the division of assets would shift dramatically. Olivia would gain controlling interest in Whitmore Enterprises. Their unborn child, upon birth, would become the primary beneficiary of additional trusts and real estate holdings. The letter ended with a stark warning. If Ethan's infidelity was proven, he would not only lose his moral standing, he would lose effective control of everything he had built. His vision blurred. He had been vaguely aware of these clauses, but he had never imagined Olivia would enforce them. The thought of losing his empire, his name, his entire legacy, sent ice through his veins. Beads of sweat formed on his brow. Vanessa, noticing his sudden pallor, placed a hand on his shoulder. "What is it?" she murmured. "Are you okay?" Ethan clenched the letter in his fist, swallowing hard. He could feel eyes on him, the hum of conversation shifting toward curiosity. He forced a tight, hollow smile. "It's nothing," he muttered. "Just a work emergency." But deep down, He knew his world had just begun to collapse. Ethan forced out a laugh, but the sound was hollow, forced. His hands clenched at his sides as he felt eyes lingering on him. Ryan Carter stepped closer, his brow furrowed. "Ethan, you look like you've seen a ghost." Ethan straightened, slipping into the mask he had perfected for years. "All good," he said, though his voice wavered slightly. "Just a work issue, excuse me." Without waiting for a response, he grabbed Vanessa's arm and steered her away from the crowded ballroom, leading her down a quiet hallway near the restrooms. "Ethan, what's going on?" Vanessa asked, her voice sharp with concern, but also a tinge of irritation. She wasn't used to seeing him shaken. He turned to her, eyes wild, voice low and urgent. "Olivia knows. She's turning my own contract against me. If she follows through, I stand to lose everything. My holdings, my properties, all of it." Vanessa's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. Then, slowly, it hardened. "That's ridiculous. Can she really do that?" Ethan let out a bitter exhale. "Apparently so. Her father made me sign a morality clause before we got married. I never thought it would matter. Olivia's always been level-headed. I never expected her to invoke it." Vanessa inhaled sharply, crossing her arms. "So, what do we do now?" Ethan paced, running a hand through his hair. "We don't do anything. I have to fix this. My entire reputation, my public image, my empire, it's all at stake." Something flickered across Vanessa's face. Jealousy, frustration. "What about us?" she pressed. Ethan let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Us," he scoffed, shaking his head. "Right now, I have to salvage my standing. Maybe this was a mistake." The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Vanessa stiffened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "A mistake?" Her voice was low, seething. "You pursued me, Ethan. Don't turn this around just because it's inconvenient now." They stood there, locked in silent hostility, while the distant hum of the banquet continued beyond the corridor. Ethan's mind raced. Olivia's calm facade had been a carefully laid trap, and he had walked straight into it. With one envelope, she had forced his entire world to the brink of collapse. If he didn't return home immediately, if he didn't try to fix this, he might never recover. But was that even an option anymore? As the final hour of the banquet ticked by, the golden glow of the ballroom felt suffocating. The cheerful chatter of his old classmates blurred into background noise. Vanessa, still fuming, took another sip of champagne, this time more forcefully. The thrill was gone. Vanessa's eyes darted around the banquet hall, her confidence now replaced by unease. She could feel the weight of the stairs, the hushed whispers following them like ghosts. The excitement of sneaking around had been thrilling, until now. Now the consequences felt real. Ethan needed a plan. Fast. Could he deny the affair? No. Olivia's father, Henry Calloway, was one of the most respected attorneys in New York. If Olivia had made a move, it meant she had proof. Photos, financial records, text messages. Damning, undeniable proof. A wave of panic tightened his chest. He had been too careless, too arrogant. Vanessa leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan, maybe we should go. People are staring, and you don't look well." He gave a slow, strained nod, pressing his palm to his forehead as a headache pulsed behind his eyes. Without another word, they slipped out of the ballroom, ignoring the curious glances trailing them. Outside, his limo idled at the curb. The moment they slid into the back seat, Ethan collapsed against the leather seat, rubbing his temples. "Head back to the hotel," he muttered to the driver. Vanessa sat beside him, gripping the hem of her dress. "So what happens now?" Ethan turned to her, eyes dark, haunted. "I need to go back to Olivia. Figure this out. Grovel if I have to. Maybe I can salvage something." Her jaw tightened. "So you're just tossing me aside?" His patience snapped. "This isn't about you, Vanessa. If Olivia files that paperwork, I lose Whitmore Enterprises. That means control over expansions, board seats, everything. Investors will panic if they sense instability." Vanessa swallowed hard, then exhaled slowly. "Do what you have to," she said. "But don't expect me to wait forever." Ethan clenched his fists. His mind spun as the limo sped through the Manhattan streets, neon lights flashing across the windows. Every street lamp felt like a countdown, each second bringing him closer to the collapse of his carefully curated life. Then, for the first time, he saw Olivia clearly. The quiet strength she had always carried. The woman he had underestimated. By the time they reached the hotel, Ethan's breaths were shallow, panic clawing at his chest. "I need to get my things." I'll leave for the Hamptons tonight. Vanessa stepped out, arms crossed. Fine, but don't keep me in the dark, Ethan. He met her gaze, desperation flickering in his eyes. I'll call you. Upstairs, Ethan flung open his suitcase, tossing clothes and toiletries inside without care. He reached for his cufflinks. Silver, engraved, the ones Olivia had given him on their anniversary. For the first time, guilt cut deeper than fear. That soft smile. Ethan had seen it 100 times before, on anniversaries, in quiet morning moments, on the day she had gifted him those silver cufflinks. But tonight, the memory tormented him. Why did I risk everything? He had no answer. Leaving the cufflinks behind, he zipped his luggage, grabbed his coat, and hurried out. The driver loaded his bags into the trunk, and as the car sped through the dimly lit streets, Ethan stared out the window, a sinking feeling tightening in his chest. The adrenaline rush of his affair had long faded, replaced by the crushing weight of what he stood to lose. By dawn, there was only one certainty. He had to face Olivia. The Whitmore estate was eerily silent when Ethan arrived in the early hours of Sunday. He let himself in with his key, stepping into the dimly lit foyer. The ticking of the antique grandfather clock echoed in the stillness, marking every agonizing second. He set down his luggage, glancing around. The house, his home, felt foreign now, like a place that no longer belonged to him. Then he saw her. Olivia sat curled up on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket. A single lamp cast a soft glow over her face, highlighting the exhaustion in her features. Puffy eyes, dark circles, the unmistakable signs of emotional toll. She looked up, her gaze meeting his. Ethan swallowed hard. Olivia, she lifted a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Don't insult me with a denial, Ethan. I know everything. His chest tightened, guilt clawing at him. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. His voice wavered. I got carried away. Olivia exhaled, a slow, measured breath. You think I care about your excuses? Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of raw pain beneath it. You were unfaithful while I carried our child, and then you flaunted her at your reunion. She shook her head. At least have the decency to be honest with me. Ethan sank into a nearby armchair, burying his face in his hands. Yes, he admitted hoarsely. I betrayed you. I was selfish. I wanted something different, a thrill. It was a mistake. A bitter smile ghosted across Olivia's lips. A mistake? She repeated. Forgetting a birthday is a mistake, Ethan. This was a betrayal. She glanced down at her belly, resting a protective hand over it. And it's not just me you betrayed. It's our baby. A heavy silence settled between them, thick with regret, pain, and the unspoken truth that nothing would ever be the same. Finally, Olivia straightened, her voice steady. Jacob Lawson sent you those documents so you'd understand what's at stake. Her gaze was unwavering, resolute. I have every right to protect my child and my dignity. I won't stand by while you conduct a public affair. Ethan's face drained of color. He took a step closer, his voice raw with desperation. Olivia, please. Don't take Whitmore Enterprises from me. It's everything I've worked for. She studied him, eyes filled with something between sorrow and finality. You did work for it, she acknowledged. But I stood by you. My family's connections gave you access to the people who built your empire. I believed in you. And now, you've made me doubt everything about our marriage. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. Tell me what to do. Anything. I'll fix this. His voice cracked. If ending things with Vanessa is what it takes, I'll do it. I already left her. Olivia's expression remained unwritable. Ending the affair is the bare minimum, she said, her voice steady. It doesn't erase what you've done, but it's a start. If you want any hope of redemption, you'll have to prove that you can be faithful and devoted, not just for appearances, but because it actually means something. Ethan's shoulders sagged. Tears blurred his vision, an uncharacteristic display of vulnerability. I love you, Olivia. I don't want to lose you. She inhaled sharply, looking away for a brief moment. Love should have mattered before you did this, she murmured. Whether our marriage can be saved? I don't know. That won't happen overnight. For now, I'm focused on our child and my own well-being. She straightened, her gaze unwavering. We'll meet with Jacob Lawson soon to discuss the legal details and what role you'll play in this baby's life. Ethan nodded, shame washing over him in waves. He had spent years crafting an untouchable image, convincing himself he was in control. Now he stood at a crossroads, his empire on the brink of collapse, his marriage shattered. And yet, Olivia had not completely shut the door. Redemption was possible, but it was conditional, fragile, and entirely dependent on his willingness to change. That night, Ethan slept in a guest room. Olivia retreated to their master bedroom, locking the door behind her. For the first time in years, Ethan faced the silence of his own choices. Months later, the house felt different. Lighter, warmer. Ethan had spent the past months proving, not just with words, but through actions, that he was willing to change. He stepped away from high-profile parties, focused on his business without distractions, and most importantly, attended every doctor's appointment, every quiet moment Olivia allowed him to be part of. It wasn't easy. Trust was not rebuilt overnight. But the night Olivia went into labor, Ethan was the one holding her hand. Through the pain, the exhaustion, she looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something different. A man who had fallen, but had chosen to rise. When their baby's first cries filled the hospital room, Ethan broke down. Not from fear, not from guilt, but from the overwhelming realization that this was what mattered. Not power, not wealth, not status. Family, a new beginning. Weeks later, Olivia stood by the window, watching Ethan outside, cradling their newborn daughter in his arms. The past still lingered between them, but so did hope. She didn't know if she could ever love him the same way again, but maybe, just maybe, they could build something stronger. Not the illusion of a perfect marriage, but something real, something worth fighting for. As the sun set over the estate, Olivia whispered, "Maybe second chances do exist." And for the first time in a long time, she almost believed it. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. If you've been captivated by this tale of power, betrayal, and a pregnant wife's unwavering resolve, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to bring you more gripping stories about life's unexpected twists, moral reckonings, and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Do you believe in second chances? Drop your thoughts below. A heartfelt message through this story. Maybe, as you read this, you and I have both gone through something like this. Maybe we've seen it happen, or maybe we've made these mistakes ourselves. And I, more than anyone, understand the pain, the regret, and the lessons hidden inside this story. I feel for Ethan, the man who built everything, his career, his reputation, his family, only to risk it all for a moment of desire. When he stepped into an affair, maybe he didn't see himself as a bad person. Maybe he was searching for something he couldn't explain. But his mistake was not in feeling lost, it was in not stopping before it was too late. I feel for Olivia, the pregnant wife, who carried not just a child but the weight of betrayal. A woman in love, especially a mother, doesn't just want a man by her side. She wants honesty. And when the truth came out, she didn't scream, didn't beg. She simply chose to stand strong. She showed us that self-worth is not about keeping someone who betrayed you. It's about knowing when to walk away. And I even feel for Vanessa, the so-called other woman. Is she the villain? Or is she just another person searching for love, attention, or the feeling of being chosen? In the end, did anyone in this story truly win? Or did they all lose something precious? No one in this story is completely guilty. But in some way, they all caused pain, to themselves and to each other. We often think we're just following our hearts, that if we don't talk about the truth, no one gets hurt. But in the end, the truth always comes out. And when it does, the ones who suffer the most are not the wife who was betrayed, not the husband who lost everything, not the mistress left behind, but the children. Because in the games of adults, children have no choice. We chase happiness without realizing that some children will grow up in broken families, in silent pain, with unanswered questions. And sometimes, the only lesson they learn from their parents is not love, but loss. If one day you realize you're making a mistake, stop before it's too late. Because once you go too far, there may be no way back. What do you think about this story? Do you believe in forgiveness? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe so we can continue sharing real-life stories about love, choices, and the lessons we sometimes learn too late. Thank you for listening.